Usually it says like you're recording, but I see it says it's recording. Okay. Are you guys ready?
Ready.
Okay. Start broadcast. Eric, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to start the broadcast.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, iOS 10, It Changes Everything. My name is Allison Brown, and I will be your moderator for today's session. A few brief housekeeping points, and then we'll get started. All of your lines are on mute. Today's session is being recorded, and you will all be provided with the replay in a few days. If you're experiencing problems listening to today's webinar via computer, you can also dial in. The phone number can be found in the audio section of your GoToWebinar control panel. We will have time at the end for Q&A, so if you have questions, please enter them in the question box of the control panel, and we'll get to as many as possible at the end. Welcome to today's webinar, iOS 10, It Changes Everything. We're pleased to have you with us today. And I'd like to introduce Rachel Opsler, the Vice President of Mobile Testing, and Eric Elkin, Solutions Consultant from Keynote Mobile Testing by Seagos. At this time, I'll pass it over to Rachel to start our discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Allison. So iOS 10 is here, and it offers a huge number of functionalities for native apps that your developers can now take advantage of for the first time. And whether your developers take advantage of them today or in the future, as a testing professional, you need to be ready to test these new capabilities in the most efficient way possible. We'll spend a little time first on a brief history of the iPhone today during this webinar, iPad and iOS, looking at the state of the market and how that impacts testing strategy. But we'll spend most of our time on some of the new capabilities in iOS 10, how you may see them being utilized within your various digital properties, and the most effective ways to test them. And we'll also be able to show you some of these new features and testing capabilities in action in a demo at the end that Eric will do for us. So it's hard to believe that the first iPhone was launched almost 10 years ago, 9 years to be exact, in 2007. And in this time, there's been a lot of innovation from that first generation iPhone, from the simple launch of the App Store, which seems so obvious now, but it really changed the game, to Retina display, to Touch ID, to FaceTime, to Apple Pay, and many more innovations during that time. And the phone and the tablet have changed beyond the addition of new features. If you go back to the 4s, you've got 4 different screen sizes and 5 different screen resolutions that you can see here just with the iPhones alone. Processing power is often different, so can be the networks that the phone supports. Over time, as LTE was added, it changed how fast data speed could be. So while this platform is certainly more uniform than what you see in the case of Android, it's still not the simple and uniform platform it once was when it first launched. Which means, of course, even with the same OS, it's still important to test across different phone models because your apps may act differently on them. You see a similar story with the iPad, and even more so because unlike the iPhone, people tend to upgrade their iPads a little less often. I know I still have an iPad 2 at home. Eric, I think you have a small child, so you may have some iPads at home as well.
I actually used to own 3 of them. I had an iPad 2. My wife now uses that as a recipe book in her kitchen. Myself, I used to have an iPad mini that my son now uses to be basically at an arm's reach anytime he's in the house for Nick Jr. and Disney Jr. And I also had an iPad Air 2 that my son uses for his own entertainment in the car. So pretty much if any of those apps that are made for children, such as Nick Jr. and Disney Jr. aren't working, I'll know within a couple of seconds.
Good. That's a great monitoring system. So that was a lot of variation of iPads. just in general, there's probably less variation in iPads across things like screen size and resolution than what you see in the iPhone. But still, there's different hardware configurations, and so you have to test across multiple iPads as well. All right, so why does this matter? Well, the iPhone is the single biggest installed base of devices. No other device except maybe the Samsung Galaxy series even gets close. So within the launch of the iPad and other devices on iOS as well, there are now over 1 billion iOS users out there. So even someone or one of the older models could have a large user base and larger than many other popular phones that are out there. And while there's a lot of evidence that users are upgrading their software on the iOS devices very quickly, so if you look on the left side here, there's data on what % of people are at iOS 9 versus iOS 8. This is obviously from before today, so this is going to change today as people start upgrading to iOS 10. This is from the end of August. But there's no denying that people actually upgrade their software very quickly, and we'll probably see more than 80%, or you would think more than 80% upgrading to iOS 10, except if you look on the right and you look at what hardware is out there. When iOS 10 comes out, it's going to support only devices with Lightning connectors. So there's actually a fair number of devices out there. So the iPhone 4 and the iPhone 4S, for example, it's about 20% of the user base. This data is from around the March timeframe, so maybe a bit less than that, but still it's a significant number of customers that are on older phones that won't be able to get iOS 10. And it's even more pronounced with the iPads. So as we were saying before, when people tend to upgrade their iPads less frequently, you end up with a larger user base on older versions. And again, data from about March or April, so maybe less than this now, but a significant number of the iPad users will not be able to upgrade to iOS 10. So what that means is that more testing across more hardware and software platforms to be able to address your application to the entire user base. And then what that really means too is that it just increases the need for an efficient automated test strategy. You can't do all this testing manually. You have to be efficient about it. And so that means being able to automate. So with that, we're going to go to our first poll. And so what we're asking is, what is the primary mobile phone you currently use? I myself am on an iPhone 6s. I pretty much upgrade from S to S, although it does feel like it's a long time to wait, which is about 2 years between models sometimes. Eric, what are you using?
I am also using the 6S.
Are you planning to buy the 7 when it comes out?
I'm very torn. I've been on an original iPhone and then upgraded to the 3S, and I've been going to every S after that. But it's always something to toy with. It always looks like fun, and I always want to upgrade, but I might wait for the S.
Okay, so I think people have had enough time to vote, so let's look at the results. All right, so we see that actually, interestingly, more people are on the 6 and the 6 Plus of the iPhones than are on the 6S or 6S Plus. So certainly true that there's people that don't upgrade every year. We have pretty small number on the iPhone SE, not that surprising. We've got some earlier iPhones and then a lot of non-iPhones, which I would expect too. So over a third of people on Android or something else. Okay. So with that, we've talked a fair amount about Apple hardware and the state of the market, but that's not the main focus of the discussion today. So let's switch to iOS software and specifically iOS 10. iOS 10, like most iOS releases, has a lot of new features. It seems to me, though, that this release is full of capabilities that could actually fundamentally change the way users interact with apps and their phone, and also change the ways and types of things that you do as a tester that you have to be aware of and you have to know how to test. These 4 capabilities, which of course are not all the capabilities in iOS 10, we don't have enough time to go over everything, but these 4 capabilities to me really fall into that category of really changing the way people interact with the phone, that your application will interact with the phone, and how you'll interact with your users. And just for everyone's knowledge, so what I mean by system apps is system apps are the apps that come built into iOS, and that would be like iMessage, the phone itself, Siri, etc. All right, so let's start with the first one, which is the system app extensions. So today, functionality exists, and before today as well, in earlier iOS versions that enables cross-app interaction. You know, probably the most common example of this is check deposit app. This really fundamentally changed the way everyone does banking. I personally don't go to an ATM anymore to deposit a check. I just go onto my phone, I select what I need to from the app, and basically most of the apps now work the way where the camera is automatically called up, and all you have to do is position the check within the lines, and it even takes the picture for you. So it makes the whole process, you know, much easier than it used to be. So now imagine that instead of calling a system app from inside your app, like calling the camera from inside your app, users instead can invoke functionality around your app within system apps if you've provided the appropriate app extensions. There are some limited capabilities in iOS for things like this before iOS 10, like some specific integrations Apple did with Yelp, for instance. You can see restaurants and ratings within Maps. But now these APIs are available to all developers to use in more system apps to write your own app extensions to make your content available. So for instance, to go from seeing restaurants and ratings in Maps to actually being able to book a reservation or calling an Uber. So some more examples include iMessage. So applications can now present themselves right in the iMessage interface. An example here could be getting a message from a friend and texting her a payment or ordering lunch together as a group, all by interacting with the third-party application through iMessage. Another example could be Maps. So I mentioned, you know, there's restaurant reviews, you'll be able to do reservations, ride booking, etc. The phone. So now there's some extensions that allow voice over IP apps the ability to integrate with the classic iPhone user interface. So you can see that in the second picture here, that basically this is a WhatsApp call, and when that call is coming in from someone, it appears just like a regular phone call or a FaceTime call would appear, with the person's picture showing up, the ability to slide to answer, etc. So it's integrated right into the phone application. And then Siri, and this is probably the most significant one, although now it's limited to certain types of apps due to syntax support. So it can support messaging apps, sending, receiving payment, searching photos, booking a ride, and managing workouts. So an example of this would be, you know, the one that's shown here. So for ride sharing, you can say, get me a lift to SFO, and then within Siri, it'll come up with a little interactive area that you can get the lift with. Same thing for things like, you know, say peer-to-peer payment apps. So Siri can handle requests to pay back friends for dinner without having to open up that specific app. So these are the current capabilities of Siri, but I think we can count on expansion to more types of apps as the syntax is supported, so relatively quickly. So when I say iOS 10 changes everything, this is a big part of it. It's really a game changer, at least a potential game changer, for how your users interact with you and your app functionality. And it may not be through your native app, but it may be that your functionality that is available within a system app. Now, whether or not you take advantage of this capability is, of course, the question. But I imagine that if you are, for instance, a ride-sharing company, and your competitor has an integration to the Maps app so that the option to take a Lyft shows up every time the user chooses a restaurant, you would be at a very big disadvantage if you were a competitor of Lyft and your option did not also show up at the same time. These capabilities really allow you to go to the users where they are in the phone, where they're currently working in the phone, and provide additional options for how they choose to interact with you. So that's a lot to think about. And I think we'll go to our next poll now. And for this poll, we're going to ask you to think about which of these system-level apps will your mobile app or apps first utilize. And so you may have some plans in mind. You may already know that there's things in the works or things already developed for your applications. There may not be any plans in mind. So I'm asking you to think about it. Think about what types of integrations or functionality could make sense for your app. And if you don't think any are relevant, let us know that too. You know, certainly there could be apps where it doesn't really make sense to utilize system extensions. I think, you know, of an airline app, you know, I get an email that tells me it's time for me to check in. So I click on the email, it automatically opens the app, I go through the check-in process. Now, might it make sense to have it be a text message and be able to complete that within the iMessage app instead? Maybe. Maybe it's too much stuff to do within an iMessage app. I'm not sure. So it's an interesting thing to think about. While people are voting, Eric, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, definitely. I'm very excited for working within iMessage. So I know, just as an example, I recently went on a camping trip down to West Virginia, and we had you know, a group of people go down. It was about 10 people, and you know, everyone participated in different parts of the camping trip. Some people stayed in the cabin. Some people actually slept in tents. And so we tried to divide all the money up. We used a whole spreadsheet that we built in Google Sheets. We also were looking to collect money because different people were covering different things by using Venmo or PayPal. So it got pretty difficult to jump between you know, iMessage and all these other apps to try and control, you know, where money was going. So everything being able to be in one central location, such as iMessage, would have made that whole process more enjoyable and, you know, more quickly.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, so let's look at the poll results. All right, so we see that the biggest one people chose is Maps, but it's actually pretty even across a lot of people. So also iMessage, Phone, and Siri got a bunch of votes, and then about a quarter of people thought that maybe it wouldn't be relevant for their particular app. Okay, so let's talk about these system app extensions and what the actual impact to testing is. So first, an extension is delivered as part of your native app. So the good news is that it's part of the same submission to the App Store. The bad news is that it's still a separate binary that runs independent of the app used to deliver it. So this is additional functionality that needs to be tested, and it's outside of the actual app itself. So you need to test your app plus all the other relevant system apps that you've written extensions for. And this could not only be one system app, but it could be multiple system apps. So imagine you're a ride-sharing app. You might want an extension in Messages, Siri, and Maps as well. So you've just increased your testing time pretty significantly. The other thing is that you're spending time testing in an app that isn't your own, so you need to get to know those apps and their idiosyncrasies as well. The other thing that this can mean is that because your iOS app now is becoming more and more different than your Android app, it widens the gap between your apps. And so that may mean more testing because you can't use common tests across both your iOS and Android app anymore. It also can extend to the actual development platform utilized. So to take advantage of these capabilities in iOS, there could be more of an incentive to utilize Apple developer tools, as other tools will be trying to keep up with these latest capabilities but may not have them yet. It may also mean that utilizing some of the platforms that wrap web apps and enable common code bases between Android and iOS are less attractive going forward. So how big of an impact is this on your testing? So this impact is pretty high. You're multiplying use cases across multiple apps, you're testing within multiple apps, and the differences between Android and iOS are getting more pronounced. So in order to be able to keep up with the order of magnitude increase in tests, it's key to have at least your build acceptance tests automated. This is something that, and the other thing that's really important to do is to make sure that you can operate on system apps. So you want to be able to do object level scripting, be able to see objects of the system apps, be able to control system apps, launch system apps, test within them. So this is something that Keynote Mobile Testing supports, and we'll show you this in action later today in the demo. The other thing that's key here is automation of the whole process. So not just automation of some tests, but making sure that every time you kick off a new build, you're automatically testing it and you don't have any manual interaction in that process. So, you could be automatically triggering a build from Jenkins, whatever build system you're using, and then kicking off your build acceptance test. And that's a key part of the formula, that you don't want to have any manual interaction in that, because that really slows down the process. All right, so now we're coming to our third and last poll. And the question we're asking now is, on average, how often do you update your native apps? So Eric, you work with a lot of our customers very directly. What do you see out there?
I think most of the conversation is, the goal is daily. It's a tough goal to get to. So I would say more often than not, the people that we're talking to are updating a couple of times a week to monthly, kind of somewhere in between that sliding scale.
Okay, that makes sense. We'll give people maybe another 10 seconds to vote. All right, and then let's see what results we got. All right, so we see that, so the majority of customers, almost 50%, so 45% are updating monthly, but we do have some that are updating weekly and even daily, 7% daily, and then 21% quarterly, and then about 12% less often than that. So it does seem like the critical mass is moving towards updating a little bit more often, say on a monthly basis. All right, so let's move on to the second new functionality that we wanted to talk about, which is iMessage apps. So we've just talked about system app extensions, and iMessage is one of those system apps that you can write an extension for. But Apple's gone a step farther with iMessage. You can actually have a separate app, a separate iMessage app. They actually launched an app store for iMessage apps. So why is this interesting? Well, with an estimated 800 million iMessage users, you can imagine why Apple's providing unprecedented access to this app is a big deal. This is a huge market that anyone can access, and it really goes head-to-head with companies or apps like Facebook, and allows brands the ability to let friends create content and experiences together in real time. So imagine you can do social shopping, dating, peer payments, and gaming, and it's all possible inside of iMessage. So this is something that Facebook has also been able to capitalize on, but if you look at what we're showing here on the left, recent numbers, messaging apps have actually overtaken, or the top messaging apps have overtaken the top social apps in terms of traffic. So now the trend is that people are doing more social things actually in messaging apps than in social apps. The other interesting thing about this is that the average number of times a user typically accesses their messaging app of choice during a day is 9. It's much less for a social app. So that means that people are in these types of apps more often, and there's a huge number of people that are using them. Now, a lot of the social commerce that happens within these apps is accomplished through something called stickers. This concept of stickers isn't new, so Facebook uses them now. But now developers can create their own for iMessage. And these new iMessage stickers, and there's one shown here on the right, the ice cream cone. The stickers allow anyone that downloaded the sticker from the Message App Store to send that sticker to someone that doesn't have that sticker Message app. So it doesn't matter if they have it or not, anyone can send a sticker to someone else. If the person they sent it to don't have the app, there's a link underneath the sticker, and you can see that very small there, from ice cream, on the device. And that link is called inline app attribution. What this does is this makes this app inherently viral, because it means that anyone you send this to that doesn't already have it can click on that, download it themselves. So it becomes a very viral platform for really getting things from user to user very quickly. So let's go think about an example. You could be a clothing company that puts out a sticker of a new, very cool pair of jeans. You can have an inline app attribution connected to it, and what that does is it'll load the related clothing company app where in iMessage you can complete the transaction to buy that pair of jeans. So friends can share the latest thing that they bought with their friends, who can then also look at it and buy it themselves. So really, given the size of the iMessage audience, 800 million iMessage users, the idea of the size of this market is really huge, and probably not something that a brand is going to want to overlook. So what does this mean for testing? Unlike the app extension that we were talking about before, this is actually a separate app involving a separate app submission. This means that you may make updates to this app separately from your native app, but you still want to keep them in sync. So you've essentially now doubled the number of apps under test. And every time there's a new functionality, you've got 2 times the number of apps to update. So that's pretty significant. So again, here, the impact to testing is pretty high. The capabilities I mentioned earlier for system apps here are still important. You want to be able to do your build automation testing. You want to integrate to your continuous integration process. And you want to be able to act on objects within system apps, specifically here, iMessage. The other thing that's interesting here is that a lot of what you're doing here is image-based. Could even be something that's a video-based. It could be an interactive GIF, for instance. And so you may want to make sure that your images show up exactly as you want them to. So as well as doing object-level scripting, be able to write scripts that operate on the objects, you may also want to do some image match scripting so you can validate that your brand is appearing as you want it to. All right, so let's go to the next new functionality on the list, which is new notifications. So now developers can customize the look of notifications. And in addition to this, the notifications are viewable from the lock screen. This is huge for me. I always found the iOS notifications to be very annoying. You can kind of see there's something there, but you can't really do anything with it. And when you unlock the phone, you have to separately go to the app to see what the message was. So now you can act on them from the lock screen. You can potentially view rich content, including images, GIFs, audio and video files that can enable you to take action. You could, for instance, and this is the example shown on the right, you could have a message that says Uber's on the way, and you swipe on it, and then the interaction allows you to cancel your ride if you want to. And this is all things that you can do essentially from the lock screen. So what does this mean for impact to testing, the custom notifications? Well, again, it's another area of iOS to test. You have to make sure that the notification shows up. You need to make sure that it's within a specified period of time that you deem as acceptable, and it needs to have the right UI. You also may have limited capabilities, things you can do from the notification. And so This means that you need to test that functionality as well. So whatever capabilities you need to do from the notification, like being able to cancel your Uber ride. So the impact assessment here is medium. Well, why is it medium? Well, the use cases are somewhat limited to how much functionality you can do. You probably are already testing that your notification shows up within a certain period of time, but really what's different here is the new look and feel and the additional capabilities. So there is certainly more to test here, but it's somewhat limited. It's not as big an impact as the system app extensions and the whole new app that you have in iMessage. All right, so let's talk now about the last one before we'll dive into a demo. So the last one is home and search screen widgets. So you can now create a widget that's available to users through the search screen and accessible both through white swiping from the home screen and the lock screen. So this is interesting because, again, they're available without unlocking the phone. So there's an example here where we've gone to the search screen. You see an ESPN widget. You can click on the widget. You can see a bunch more things. You can actually select to then watch a video. So there's a lot of functionality that you can do without having to dive in and directly go to the app or find the app on the phone, all just from your search screen. The widgets are a really important thing to support for brands. Essentially, think of the widgets kind of as your shortcut screen. So everything that you want immediate access to, you're probably going to put on your widget board. And if your competitors, again, are on the widget board and you are not, then probably your users are going to be spending more time in their applications than yours. So what does this mean for testing? It's another widget you have to develop and test. It certainly removes an annoyance for customers, so it's something that they may really start using. You have to validate the widget functionality. You have to display that the info is correct in the widget, and you have to ensure the widget appears when added by the user. So if you go to the bottom of all your widgets, edit widget, add widget, you want to make sure that it then is showing up. Here again, though, the impact of this to testing is medium. And basically, again, because it's a small, somewhat limited set of functionality, and so it does add a bunch of testing, but it's not as significant as, again, a completely different app. Important to enable here to be able to test this, again, is being able to act on system apps and do object scripting on system apps and specifically on widgets. Also important here could be image and text validation if you want to make sure that the exact text and the exact images that you want to have showing in the widget are there. All right, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Eric, and he's going to show us a demo of some of this functionality that we just talked about in iOS 10.
Thank you, Rachel. So as Rachel mentioned, my name's Eric. So what we're taking a look at right now on screen is Keynote Mobile Testing's platform here. And just to give you kind of a quick lay of the land as we're going along, on the left here are some different modules that you can jump into. We're in our automation module right now, and we're looking at scripting. So we're looking at using our tool to build some automated scripts to kind of showcase what you can do now with iOS 10 and the latest update that's happened. So the first thing that we're looking at here is a basic script command called object touch. So what object touch is going to allow us to do is to act on objects that are available on the phone. Typically with iOS, before this iOS 10 release, we were able to act on objects within native applications. So native applications meaning applications that you're releasing yourself as a company. So we could act on, an application that you released. If you had a web application that was available in Safari on the website, we could also act on objects within there. But as far as acting on objects within system-level applications, Apple was limiting that. This is something that Android's been doing for a long time. So now that Apple is doing this as well, it's going to really kind of open up the doors for how you can kind of build tests. So the first thing that we're going to look at here, we're looking at a real device over on the right that's running iOS 10, and we're looking at kind of the objects that are available on screen. So if I refresh this, we should see different objects that we can act on over here on the left. They are mirroring the actual objects that are on the device. So if we go into a system level application, maybe settings, we refresh what we're looking at here, we're going to be able to view all of the objects that are over here on the right. If we wanted to kind of take a deeper dive into the objects that are available to act on, we could go to the Object Spy button. This will again allow us to compare what's actually on the device's screen versus what we're looking at. We can click on individual objects. It's going to highlight them. We can go through and see attributes such as the XPath, the object path, and these are all individual kind of parameters that we can act on when building these automated tests. We can take a look at a couple different applications. I'm actually pretty excited about the weather application. You'll see the description and the text on the objects here. You'll actually be able to see what the temperature is. There's some fun data sets that you may be able to get out of this. I'm pretty excited about that. We can also take a look, as Rachel mentioned, kind of widgets. So if we look here, you can see the edit button. When our screen refreshes, will be available to interact with at an object level. Right here, so you can kind of add widgets and control widgets and delete them all via object level. So this is all going to be able to be automated and scripted and done right from our built-in automation platform. So to give you an example of some quick system level, object level actions that you could perform, let's take a look at this launch applications script that we have written. And all this script is performing is launching different system level applications and verifying that they're open. And this is something that you previously could not do on an Apple device, so this is something that will be new with iOS 10. If we go ahead and run this script, what you're going to see it do is launch the Maps application. You can select different applications from this drop-down. This is all running automatically right now. It's verifying that Maps is open. Now this drop-down has been Preferences, so System Preferences and Settings here. We're verifying that that's open. Then we're going to move on to open up Notifications here and verify that Notifications is open. So being able to launch applications on command at an object level is going to allow you to switch from maybe your native application to a system level application. It's going to allow you to switch from different system level applications in one automated script. So you're not going to have to write a script that's maybe XY coordinate or text-based or anything of that nature to actually control the OS on an Apple device. This is something, once again, that's going to be new in iOS 10. Is going to be groundbreaking and very helpful for writing different automated tests. A use case that you can think about here is somebody is on your, maybe your native application, and they are either requesting to be added to maybe an email subscribe list, or they're asking for support, and you want to make sure that they get an email saying that someone's going to contact them within 30 minutes. If you want to verify that that message has come through to the Mail app, that was something that you previously really couldn't do with iOS, because you would have had to switch from your native application to the Mail application to check and verify that that email has come through. The only way that it was possible was by using maybe text verification, and it created a lot of brittleness to the script. But being able to access system level applications, we can now automate that script entirely through our platform just at an object level, which means you can kind of cascade that test across to all the different iOS devices that have different screen resolutions, and it becomes a very fluid script. Now this is something that Keynote is very uniquely providing. Many other testing platforms out there are kind of limiting your interaction to just your native application. So while other testing platforms such as Appium do allow you to do a very good job testing at an object level, they also do not allow you to move outside of your application. So Appium limits your interaction to just the application that you're looking to test on, so that one that you're releasing. So that's something to think about in all these new use cases and kind of how Apple is re-engineering the user flow and the user experience. So the user is going to be interacting with your application from these system-level applications, so you need to make sure that the platform that you're using to test gives you access at an object level to these system applications so that you can properly test the functionality of your application. So kind of moving along to what we talked about in the webcast, let's look at messages. So in taking a look at messages, we're kind of going to show you a very quick user flow of using what we previously talked about. You saw how we could act on objects from that object touch command. We could also launch applications. So let's show you what that would look like in a very quick form of sending a sticker using the new iMessage. So right now we're looking at an action. So an action is kind of a building block of a test case. You could also think of an action as a function. So this first action that we're looking at is a basic action that's going to launch my iMessage application. It's going to verify that the application is open. After this action, we're going to run a second action that is opening a particular message in iMessage. You'll see when I'm clicking on the object touch, you're seeing it's highlighting specific objects that it's touching. Now this screen can get rather congested. That's why we have that object spy that we looked at before to help you organize it better. We're going to browse for a particular sticker. We're going to select a sticker, and then we're going to send that sticker and verify that that sticker's been delivered. So I'm going to go over to a test case here to kind of show you what this looks like when you actually run it. So I'm going to hit the run command here. You can see these are our two actions, these gear icons. So on the phone, it's going to follow along here and run. So we've opened up iMessage. Now that iMessage is open, it's verifying that it's open. And verification can come in many different forms. In this particular case, we're looking for an object that is loaded on the screen to verify that it's open, so that we know it is open. Now opened up a message. See a few test messages here. We're going to go ahead and select on this Applications button down here. So you can see it right next to the message input form. Once that opens, you'll see stickers available for us to select. So I don't think it's opened up our sticker store yet. So I'm going to stop this and we can go ahead and rerun it. So we're still working out a couple of bugs that have happened with iOS 10 being released today. Let's go ahead and run this again. I've had a very pleasant experience scripting with iOS 10. Before scripting with some of the previous iOS releases, it hasn't not been pleasant, but sometimes you have to use some commands that are outside of the realm of object level, such as text recognition or image recognition, in order to successfully complete kind of these real-world test cases that we're looking to complete. With scripting at object level with iOS 10. It's really been a very welcome change, being able to access all these system-level applications. So you can see here the widgets actually did load. So we're going to go ahead and send this particular sticker. And by widget before I meant sticker. So we're sending a minion sticker. This is a very basic example of what a test case could look like. So right now we're verifying that this object that says delivered right there loaded on the screen. So you can see we have a successful result here that this test ran. And the delivered object did appear. So once we are kind of doing this and making sure that we can actually use iMessage, we can send these different stickers or use that application tab to use our application and interact with iMessage. Rachel kind of mentioned that you might be worried about what the sticker looks like or what your branding is showing up as. And you might want to verify that that image actually matches your branding. So kind of show you a way that we can tackle that using our platform. I've created what we call a wait event. Basically, a wait event allows you to do a variety of different things. So what we're doing here on this wait event is we want to make sure that this previous image here that we've selected matches what shows up on the screen. So we want to look at a pixel for pixel match. And we can kind of augment how many of the pixels that we want to match. Do we want to match 100% of the pixels? Or do we want to drop it down to only make sure that 80% of the pixels match? Like how spot on do we want to be with how this image is showing up? So when we run this test here, this set of pixels is going to be searched for anywhere on the screen here. So obviously a representation of it is right here that came through in the message. You can also see a partial representation down here, still with the stickers available to choose, loaded. Obviously there's a lot of other minions. This is the minion that we selected. So once this wait event runs, I'm going to have a successful result. So we'll see that this set of pixels was located on the screen here. So if we go to view the result, on my wait event here, I'm going to view, it's going to show you the actual image. So this was the image it pulled from the phone, this real device that we're running the test on. Our expected image, it's showing you we selected this small area of pixels, showing you the overall picture that was loaded. We're looking at this small set of pixels. And it's going to show you the image comparison. So it's going to show you what didn't match and what did match. So just this set of pixels, the minion here, did match our expected image. None of the other ones here. So even down here, this was that one that actually was the picture, but it was partially cut off. So you can see it can recognize that that doesn't match. And these images are available through our results portal in full form. So you can actually take a larger look at these and you can see what matched and what didn't match. And you'll see this pink overlay kind of showing you what matches and what does not match. So now moving along, when we're kind of looking at the device, Rachel was talking about that notifications look differently when you're interacting with the device. So if we get a message sent to our phone, which I'm doing from my personal device that's sitting on my desk right now, I'm going to send an animated GIF to this phone to kind of see how your notifications are going to look differently than the user is previously experienced to see. And everyone is very excited about kind of how this looks. So this message came through. If I were to swipe to the right with this particular one, this would pull me right into the message application and I could react. But if I swipe left here, it's going to give me an option to view this or clear this. So if I go ahead and click on view, it's going to actually pull up that animated GIF of everyone's favorite Fozzie Bear and Kermit the Frog. And we would be able to actually view what's going on within this message that was sent. Now this is going to be different for applications and notifications, and you're going to be able to do a lot of customization inside of here. So you can see just this interaction is very different than previous home screen notifications. So this is something that's going to be very different for your applications, and I think a lot of users are going to be very excited about being able to interact with your application directly from the home screen. And with that, I'll go ahead and send it back to Rachel.
Thanks, Eric. So Eric gave you a pretty good quick view of what the tool can do. In general, Keynote Mobile Testing is a mobile app testing platform for Agile development teams. We do have day one support for iOS 10, as you saw. We're able to create scripts that act on iOS 10 objects, both with native apps and also within system apps. So we have full support for system app automation. We have capabilities to integrate into your build process, integrations with Jenkins. You can do integrations with other build tools. We have hundreds of devices out in the cloud. So with iOS devices as well as Android devices too. And lots of flexible scripting options and the ability to both interact with devices, as you could see Eric doing manually, as well as write scripts on them. So with that, I think we have a little bit of time for questions. So Allison, do we have any questions?
We do. We had some questions come in from our audience. And just as a quick reminder, you guys can ask more in the chat box, although you know, we have a lot coming in, so we might not be able to get to them all. So here's the first question. What is the best way to validate stickers?
So that's a great question. I think Eric talked about that a little bit, and so Eric, feel free to jump in on this, but it a little bit depends what you're trying to validate about the sticker. The easiest way to validate anything and the quickest way and the most reliable way to have the script work over and over and over and over is to use objects. However, if what you're trying to do is validate that the image appears exactly as you want to, then it's best to use an image validation. Eric, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. So you can see kind of from the message that we sent, we validated that it was delivered. You can actually validate that it was received at an object level. So since you can access the system level objects now, you'd be able to see that there was a sticker sent as an object. But if you do want to validate for branding, image verification, that's when we looked at actually a pixel match there.
Great. The next question is, do you require any code be added to the apps to support testing?
The answer to that is no. So you don't have to add any code to your applications, whether it's Android or iOS. We can support them as they are, essentially.
Great. Can you reiterate what the limitations that you mentioned with Siri are on this integration?
Sure. And so, by the way, this is all available in the Apple documentation for iOS 10. But what they listed is that Siri right now can support messaging apps, ride-sharing apps, photo library apps. So this is like you can search for certain photos, peer-to-peer payment apps, workout apps, and then climate control and radio apps. So that's like CarPlay, interacting with your car. And my understanding of this limitation is that it's basically a syntax limitation. So Siri understands things like Siri, send a Slack message to James, right? But Siri may not understand something that's not specific to one of these types of apps that is listed here.
Great. Here's a quick one. Can we record a script?
You can record a script. So that's something that we didn't show in the demo, but you can literally just, as you're going through it, point and click on the phone, and it will record a script exactly the same as the one that Eric showed. Eric, do you want to add anything to that? Like when you create scripts, how do you typically do it? Do you drag and drop, or do you usually use the recording mechanism?
I typically always start with the recording mechanism. It's going to allow me to stay very true to the user flow because I'm actually manually interacting with the device, just as the user is. So that's actually showing what our user experience is. And so while I'm manually interacting with the device, my steps are being recorded at an object level. And I find that this does kind of two helpful things. One, it's recording that user experience like we talked about. And two, it's going to kind of show me, if I do come across a step in my application, that maybe isn't recording right at an object level and I have to go back and tweak, it's kind of giving me something that I can present to the development team to say, we may want to rethink this or look at this because it's kind of off from what the user flow is, and it may cause potential problems somewhere within the application.
Great. This is a question we got from a couple people. Can this automation tool be used on Safari or mobile web applications?
Frankly, I have to say I've not tried it myself. I don't know if, Eric, you've looked at Safari also. I think we can see some objects in Safari as well, correct?
We definitely can. So we've been able to interact with objects on the screen inside of Safari for a while now. But you can also interact with specific buttons that are a part of Safari much better than you were able to before.
And you can also launch it programmatically as well.
Yes, absolutely, which is a huge step.
Great. Let me find the next question. Are there any other challenges you foresee in iOS 10 testing?
Well, I'm sure there will be lots of challenges in iOS 10 testing. I think that we picked out the ones that are probably the most key, which is just that your developers may be developing lots of capabilities that really reside with and interact with system-level applications, which means that the scope and breadth of the testing you have to do is just entirely changing. The good news is that there's tools out there that can easily support it with object-level scripting. So that's the good news, but the bad news is it certainly increases the breadth of what you're doing, and so the pressure to make sure that you automate as much as possible is even more intense because there's just no way to be able to get through all the testing that you're going to need to do given its expanded nature and still meet your time to market. I don't know if, Eric, you have anything you want to add.
Not so much add as reiterate. Really the goal we've heard from many companies that we've talked to about their testing strategy has been the philosophy of script once and run it across both OSs, and that's a great strategy, and still is probably going to work through proper object level scripting on native applications. But with this release of iOS 10, since Apple is kind of re-engineering that user journey where they're going from system apps to your application, it's going to kind of expand the gap like we talked about between iOS and Android. So you're really going to have to maybe pivot your views on thinking about kind of expanding some of this iOS testing that you need to do, and it almost is going to by necessity create two separate sets of tests that need to be written for each different operating system.
Yeah, so maybe the challenge here is just volume. It seems like it's going to create a lot more volume than in testing than we've had before or seen before. Okay, so we're running out of time, so just wanted to give everyone a quick view of how to reach us. If you do have more questions or if we didn't get to your question, please contact us. You can send us an email at mobiletesting@keynote.com. You can call us directly. You can go to our website and ask us a question that way. We're be happy to spend more time showing what the tool can do to script for iOS, and we'll also be sending out a recording of this webinar to everyone who signed up. So you'll be getting that in the mail shortly.
Great. Well, once again, thank you, Rachel and Eric, for taking the time to discuss the iOS 10. As Rachel said, you'll all be getting a recording of this webinar, and feel free to reach out to us. That concludes today's session. Thank you all for joining, and have a great day.